The rain had washed the port city clean during the night. When we stepped out from the lodge that morning, the stones still held a quiet sheen, as though they remembered the storm but were no longer troubled by it. The air felt rinsed. Even the harbor seemed subdued. The usual clatter softened into something almost contemplative. Francis stretched his arms once, like a man about to begin a familiar walk. Claire stood beside him, hands folded loosely in her sleeves, her face calm but attentive, as though she were listening to something just beyond the reach of sound. "We have not yet walked that way," Francis said casually, nodding toward a street that curved away from the more familiar market square. It was said so lightly that no one thought to question it. We followed. The younger ones, Sean, Liam, Aoife, and Lucia, as well as Francis and Claire, carried small packs by choice, though our lodging would have taken heavier things ahead. David had insisted on carrying his own, though he could have sent it forward as well. The rest of us, Maria, Joyce, Harriman, and I, had opted for lighter travel. I leaned into my walker, grateful for its steadiness on the uneven stones. Pearl trotted ahead, her brown and white body determinedly dragging a long stick she had adopted as if it were a treasure. The street Francis led us down grew gradually busier. Vendors were already arranging fruit and bread under striped awnings. A small group of fishermen laughed loudly near the quay. The scent of baking and brine mingled in the air. Then we saw it. The gate stood wide and welcoming at the end of a broad stone path. It was arched and sunlit, the ironwork polished by many hands. People moved in and out of it in a steady stream. Some chatted cheerfully, others carried baskets or small parcels. It looked like the natural way forward, and I couldn't wait to go through it. "Well," Sean said, adjusting the straps on his back, "that seems straightforward enough." "It does," Maria agreed. Francis did not respond immediately. He stood slightly to the side, watching, not the gate, but us, most of us eager to go through, some holding back slightly. Joyce stepped forward instinctively. "This looks like the main thoroughfare," she observed. "Well maintained, clear, no trouble getting through." "And no trouble," Liam added, "is usually a blessing." Francis smiled at that, but asked only, "What do you notice?" Aoife squinted at the gate as if trying to see something more than what was obvious. "It's busy," she said. "Busy is not wrong," Joyce replied lightly. "No," Aoife agreed, "just loud." Claire had grown very still. She tilted her head slightly, as though adjusting to a shift in wind. Harriman leaned more firmly into his cane, his body angled slightly left as always. Pearl dropped her stick to sniff at the base of the wide gate and then unexpectedly backed away with a small huff. "That's odd," Sean said. Pearl circled once and returned to Joyce, pressing her body against her leg. Francis glanced down at the dog. "You don't approve, Pearl?" Pearl sneezed and sat. We laughed softly. "Dogs are sometimes wiser than we are," Claire murmured. Lucia had not spoken. She stood a little apart, her eyes moving along the stone wall that framed the wide gate. Something about her posture made me look in the same direction. There, half hidden by vines and low-hanging branches, Lucia had found another opening. It was small, so small that at first glance it seemed like a neglected service entrance. The iron was rusted. Ivy crept across its hinges. The path leading to it was barely visible under moss and leaf litter. Lucia stepped closer, brushing aside a vine with hesitant fingers in order to examine it. "There's another way," she said quietly. The rest of us turned. Joyce narrowed her eyes. "That?" she asked. "That's not the main route." "No," Francis agreed gently, "it's not." "But I've always said, if there's a longer way, take it," Joyce continued. "This seems to fit. It may not be longer, but it's more difficult, more obscure." Claire's lips curved in the faintest smile. "What do you notice?" Francis asked again, to no one in particular. "It's narrow," Liam said. "And overgrown," Maria added, wrinkling her nose. "You'd miss it if you weren't looking," Aoife said. Harriman chuckled. "Looks like it hasn't been popular." Joyce's interest was piquing. "It also looks inconvenient," she said almost gleefully. Lucia's voice was soft but steady. It feels right. No one argued. Francis stepped toward the smaller gate. He did not announce that this was the way. He did not compare it to the wide gate. He simply walked toward it as if continuing a conversation already underway. Claire followed just slightly behind him. The rest of us exchanged glances, and then one by one we moved as well. Up close, the narrow gate seemed even smaller than it had from a distance. The opening was just wide enough for a single person to pass at a time, possibly even sideways. Moss clung to the lower stones. A thorn caught lightly at Maria's sleeve as she leaned closer. "This will be a tight squeeze," Sean said. Claire rested her hand lightly on the iron. "Sometimes," she said softly, "it's good to ask your guardian angel to show you what you cannot yet see." Francis nodded. "And perhaps what you cannot yet release." That word lingered. Release. Francis did not move immediately. He closed his eyes for a moment. His pack, though modest, was slung over his shoulder. He shifted it once, then paused. He reached into it and withdrew a small wooden bowl, worn smooth with use. He turned it in his hands, his thumb tracing its edge. "I carved this many years ago and have carried it long," he said almost to himself. "It has served me well." Claire watched him without comment. He looked at the narrow opening. Then he set the bowl gently on a flat stone beside the gate. "I can share another," he said lightly, "or eat from my hands." With that, he slipped sideways and passed through. The gate seemed to widen again, unnoticed, just enough for him, then settle again. Claire stepped forward next. She wore no visible burden, yet she did not pass through immediately. She reached into the folds of her habit and withdrew a small bundle of parchment tied with a thin cord. "These are plans," she said quietly, "for what might be built." She smiled faintly. "God builds differently." She placed the parchment beside Francis's bowl. Before stepping through, she added softly, "If you are uncertain, ask your angel. They see what we are reluctant to see." She turned slightly, her shoulders angled so that she had to pass through sideways. For a moment, her sleeve caught on a jagged edge of iron. She did not pull. She loosened her arm and slipped free, then looked back and saw that some of the group were praying quietly. Aoife moved next, her red hair bright against the stone. She had tucked something into the top of her pack. After a moment's hesitation, she drew it out, a small silver mirror. "I thought," she said with a shrug, "it might be useful." Sean raised an eyebrow. "For what?" She gave him a look. "To see if I'm still myself." Francis's voice drifted from beyond the gate. "And are you?" Aoife glanced into the mirror once more. The reflection caught the sky, not her face. She set the mirror down. "It fogs too easily," she said. She removed her pack and handed it briefly to Liam while she turned sideways. The gate seemed reluctant, narrowing as she moved. She exhaled and slipped through. Sean followed. He carried less than he could have, but he still hesitated. From his pocket, he removed a small leather pouch. "What's that?" Liam asked. "Old medals," Sean replied. "Competitions, achievements." "And?" Liam pressed. Sean looked at the wide gate behind us, bustling with people. "And I like knowing I did well." He weighed the pouch in his palm, hesitated, then crouched and placed it beside Aoife's mirror. "If I need to prove myself," he said quietly, "this may not be the place." He ducked through. Liam stood next. He did not carry much at all, yet he frowned slightly. After a long moment, he removed a folded paper from inside his shirt. He did not show it to anyone. "Plans," he said, "for after." "For after what?" Maria asked. "For after this," he replied. He tucked the paper under a stone rather than leaving it openly visible. "If it's from God," he said, "it'll wait." He squeezed through. Maria stepped forward. Her pack was modest but neatly arranged. She removed a small container wrapped in cloth. When she unwrapped it, we saw dried herbs. "For comfort," she explained. I know how to heal people. She looked at the gate. Perhaps, she said slowly, healing will be given differently. She left the herbs and passed through with unexpected grace. Lucia lingered. She had noticed the gate. That much was clear. But now that she stood before it, her shoulders tightened. Claire's voice came softly from within the gate. Ask. Lucia closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she reached into her pack and withdrew a small, carefully folded letter. From home, she whispered. It says I should not take risks. No one responded. Lucia swallowed. I have carried that sentence, she said, almost surprised at herself. She placed the letter down, smoothing it flat. Then she stepped forward. The gate seemed impossibly narrow. For a heartbeat, she froze. Harriman spoke gently behind her. Turn your shoulders, dear. She did, and she passed through. Joyce stood straighter than the rest of us. She had been walking roads for decades. There was nothing hesitant about her stance. She stepped up to the gate and examined it carefully. Well, she said briskly, this is clearly less efficient. Frances laughed softly from within. That's what I like about it. Joyce reached into the small satchel at her side and withdrew a folded map, creased from long use. I know how to navigate, she said. I'll take the inefficient way, but I don't like not knowing where I'm going. She looked toward the broad gate once more. This is not being lost, she insisted, though no one had accused her. Claire's voice drifted back. Sometimes it's not about direction, but trust. Joyce pressed her lips together. She folded the map smaller and tucked it under Frances's bowl. If we get lost, she chided him good-naturedly, I will remind you of this. She turned sideways and passed through, surprisingly nimble. Pearl approached next, stick clenched firmly in her jaws. The stick was far too long. She tried once, pushing forward and hitting both sides of the gate. She backed up and tried again, angling the stick differently. The gate resisted. It scraped loudly against the iron. Joyce knelt slightly. Pearl, she said gently, you cannot take that with you. Pearl froze. Her tail wagged uncertainly. Claire crouched just beyond the gate. What do you suppose your angel is suggesting? She asked Joyce softly. Joyce considered. Pearl looked at Joyce. Joyce extended her hand. Put it down. After a long pause, Pearl dropped the stick. It landed beside the map and medals with a dull thud. Pearl slipped through easily without it and shook herself once, as if relieved. Harriman moved forward. The cane tapped against the stone in its familiar rhythm. He paused before the gate longer than anyone else had. From the inside pocket of his jacket, he withdrew something small and wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it slowly. It was a hospital wristband. The name was his. The date was 4 years ago. The younger ones looked confused. Maria's brow furrowed. Joyce did not look surprised, but a tear dropped from her eye. I felt something tighten in my chest. Harriman held the band in his fingers, studying it as if reading it for the first time. I kept this, he said mildly, as proof. Proof of what? Liam asked quietly. That I had crossed once already. The words landed gently, not dramatically. Sean glanced at Frances. Frances did not intervene. Joyce stepped closer to Harriman, her hand hovering near his arm but not touching. You told me to let it go, she said softly. And I told you, Harriman replied, that I would meet you where roads meet. He placed the wristband beside Lucia's letter. No one gasped. We had been walking with Frances all this time, after all. The impossible had long ago ceased to be alarming. But you, Aoife began. Harriman smiled. I am not limited by the same things you are. Lucia blinked slowly. You died? 4 years ago, Joyce answered quietly, her voice steady. She did not look undone. She looked resolved. She glanced at me as I cried softly. I had missed my dad more than I could say, but I was afraid he wasn't real, that he would disappear if I touched him. And you're here? Liam asked Harriman. Harriman shrugged lightly. I'm here. Francis is here. Claire's here. He tapped his cane once, then held it up. This, he said, I also no longer need. He leaned it against the wall beside the gate. Joyce inhaled sharply. He placed his hand briefly over hers. Not everything that supports you must remain. He turned sideways. The gate seemed to widen almost imperceptibly for him. He stepped through without the cane. Joyce followed him in silence as a small yellow butterfly flew past. I stood next. My walker rested solidly beneath my hands. I did not intend to leave it. Francis's voice reached me. Not everything is meant to be relinquished. Claire added, only what keeps you from passing. I looked down at the small pouch hanging from the side of my walker. Inside was a small journal. I'd been writing in it every night, lists, reflections, contingencies, plans for how to manage, how to cope, how to control the pace. My autism demanded it. Slowly, cautiously, and uncertainly, I removed the notebook. David watched me quietly, knowingly, from the back of the line. This, I said slowly, is how I keep from being surprised. Surprise brings about meltdowns. Francis's eyes were kind. And has it prevented surprise? No, I admitted. I set the notebook down. The walker fit. I had kind of hoped it wouldn't. That would mean that God intended to heal me. I turned it slightly, angled the wheels carefully, and eased through. The gate did not resist. My mom hugged me, and we hugged my dad together. David was last. He carried his pack deliberately. For him, this was part of the pilgrimage. He removed it now and set it at his feet. From the top pocket, he withdrew a small stone. It was smooth and worn. What's that? Sean asked. A word someone once spoke over me, David said. I've carried it as weight. He held the stone out. The word was carved faintly into its surface. Strong. He turned it over in his hand. I'm not strong, he said quietly. I'm upheld. He set the stone beside the others. Then he lifted his pack again. Some burdens are mine to carry, he said. Others aren't. He stepped through. The gate closed behind us with a soft, almost inaudible click. On the other side, the path opened into woods. The air shifted immediately. The scent of damp earth and pine replaced the harbor's salt. Sunlight filtered through branches, scattering patterns across the ground. No one spoke at first. We walked. The path was narrow but clear. Moss cushioned our steps. The tension that had accompanied the gate seemed to dissolve into something almost buoyant. Aoife walked beside Lucia. You noticed it, she said quietly. Lucia shrugged. It was just there. Not everyone sees what is just there, Claire observed gently. Joyce moved alongside Harriman. You left your cane, she said. I did. And you're not leaning. I'm not. She studied him for a long moment. Does it feel different? She asked. He smiled. Yes. They did not say more, but walked hand in hand along the trail. We emerged from the woods into a meadow so unexpectedly beautiful that we all stopped. Wildflowers dotted the grass. The sky arched high and blue above us. A small stream cut gently through the field, catching the light. Pearl bounded ahead, free of her stick. Sean laughed outright. Well, this isn't punishment. Francis turned slowly in a circle, as if taking in every detail. Sometimes, he said lightly, the way that requires more of you also gives more. We spread blankets and unpacked what little we had brought for lunch. Maria produced bread and olives. Liam shared simple dried fruit. David passed around water. The conversation was not theological. It was human. Sean teased Aoife about the mirror. She nudged him in response. Lucia admitted she had expected difficulty beyond the gate. So did I said. Francis bit into a piece of bread thoughtfully. You may yet find it. Claire lay back briefly on the grass, eyes closed. Do you miss the bowl? Maria asked Francis. No, he said easily. If I need one, one will appear. Joyce leaned back on her hands, her gaze moving between the meadow and Harriman. You're not fading, she said, almost testing the statement. I'm not, he replied. I was afraid maybe you would, she said, her voice catching. The younger ones listened without fear. Something had shifted at the gate. It had not merely narrowed the path, it had widened our understanding. After lunch, we continued. The path wound gently through more woods, then rose slightly before descending toward what we knew must be our lodging for the evening. The sun moved steadily overhead. The air remained mild. There were no immediate obstacles, no thorns, no steep climbs. Any time I started to lag, Francis made sure someone stayed with me, and he slowed down the group for good measure. I felt cared for and protected. It would have been easy to assume that this was how the pilgrimage would unfold. Difficult entrance, pleasant journey. Francis did not correct that assumption. He simply walked. As the lodging came into view, a low stone structure tucked against the edge of the forest, Claire slowed slightly and looked back at us. Remember, she said gently, not every gate is visible. Lucia glanced at the trees. And not every burden is obvious, Joyce added. Harriman laughed softly. But some are hospital issued. We all smiled at that. When we reached the lodging, the door stood open. Inside, the hearth was already warm, as though someone had anticipated our arrival. David set his pack down. I leaned my walker against the wall. Pearl curled near the fire without her stick. We had left things behind. We had passed through. The path beyond had been exceedingly beautiful. And yet, as I watched the others settle in, I sensed that the gate had not been about hardship. It had been about honesty, about what we carry that keeps us wide when we're meant to narrow, about what we cling to that makes the opening seem smaller than it is. Francis caught my eye across the room. What do you notice? He asked quietly. I looked at Joyce and Harriman, sitting side by side without cane or map between them. At Lucia, lighter somehow without the letter. At Aoife, laughing without checking her reflection. At David, resting without the carved word in his pocket. He still seemed strong to me. The meadow, I said, though we had left it behind hours ago, and the soft path. He nodded. And? We're assuming it will always be like that. Claire smiled faintly from her place near the fire. It will not, she said gently. And somehow that did not frighten us, because we had learned at the gate that what must be left can be left, that our angels would help us, and that what remains will be enough. Outside and long down the path, the broad gate still welcomed its steady stream of travelers, but we no longer felt drawn to it. We had entered by another way, and though the path was quiet, it was unmistakably alive.